Is there more to prehistoric art than archaeology? The answer is yes, and I will try to explain why. The images that follow are examples of purely archaeological means of recording prehistoric art. All the drawings were done by archaeologists in the last century and portray what the scientists wanted to register. The first is a detail from a painting from the ceiling of Altamira, first discovered in 1880 but not recognized as prehistoric until 1901. The drawing is an excellent interpretation but does not portray the sensitivity of the original, the uneven surface, or its relationship to the surrounding image. Next to it, we see a relatively recent digital copy of the actual image on the rock. The second drawing is of the figure named the Sorcerer, from the cave of the Trois Frères in France. The cave was discovered in 1910. Again, although the drawing does not lack talent, it is different from the original. Breuil's drawing is looking at the viewer. The drawing on the rock is looking at the distance, and the legs of the creature, according to the old photograph, are more animal-like than the humanoid legs drawn by the archaeologist. These two drawings of a bison, again, can be seen next to a photograph of the original taken at the Grotto of Font de Gaume in France. That was found in 1901. Both drawings are once more interpretations of the original. My feeling is that the geometric house-like shapes are drawn at a later date and outside the bison and not inside. And my last example is a drawing from a painting on a shelter in Cogul, Lleida, north of Spain, discovered in 1908. The photograph next to it shows how the shelter looks today. The images are practically all gone. This detail, drawn by 5 different archaeologists when the images were still visible, portrays a hunter holding his weapons placed in front of its prey, probably a bison or a bull. Bearing in mind that carbon dating was not implemented until 1949, the difference between drawing a bison or a bull could define the antiquity of the images. The scientific accuracy that the drawing provides is not in dispute, but in terms of meaning, the interpretation of the original image is highly subjective. The full impact of the painting, its surface, size, proportion, texture, color, composition, surrounding images, and most important of all, where it is placed, get lost in the scientific drawing. What the prehistoric image maker in Chauvet, Lascaux, or Altamira wanted to portray can only be studied live and in situ. Even the lens of the camera, no matter how sophisticated, is a dead eye, as Salvador Dali called it during a documentary. What it replicates is only an approximation to the real thing. Cameras cannot satisfactorily reproduce art. This was true last century as much as it is true today. The eye of the artist can focus unrestrained by scientific accuracy, adding a different but important reading of prehistoric images. The work of Pablo Picasso is an example of how modern artists shed valuable insight on prehistoric art, illuminating places not dealt with in archaeology. He said in 1957 that the cave painter had nothing to go by, nothing to build on. He or she had to start from scratch. Modern artists can never again be in such privileged position. Hence their need to resort to all kinds of intellectual devices to achieve the same vigor and clarity of vision. At the beginning of the last century, while the images we have first seen were being brought to light in South France and northern Spain, Picasso was working in both countries, developing one of the most important paintings of the 20th century. In the making of the Demoiselles d'Avignon, the artist created a new way of portraying two-dimensional space, and cubism was invented. vanishing points became obsolete. We could say that he returned the flatness of the paintings on caves and shelters to the modern picture plane. Like the cave painter had done in prehistoric times, in the 20th century Picasso opened up the road towards a radically new approach to pictorial space, form and dimension. It was not by accident that Einstein's laws of relativity were published between 1905 and 1916, precisely the key dates when Cubism flourished. These images are a selection from drawings done between 1906 and 1907, leading to the completion of the painting. You can see how Picasso is using a schematic drawing as a means of achieving the simplicity common in the drawings on caves and shelters. Through this intellectual device, he was able to relive something of the mindset of the prehistoric artist. He thought he was discovering something new, but he was shocked to find out that the African sculptures and masks at the Ethnographic Museum in Paris and the Iberian sculptures at the Archaeological Museum in Madrid mirrored his freshly drawn images. Picasso was not alone in this journey towards a deeper understanding of the image-making process through the study of prehistoric art. In 1959, 2 years after his visit to the Altamira caves, Joan Miró bought Son Boutet, an 18th century house in Mallorca to use as a studio, and he decorated the walls with these drawings. Was he thinking of La Quinta del Sordo, where Goya painted his black murals? Or did he have in mind the caves of Altamira? Probably both. Pinned on one of the walls of the studio, we see several new paper cuttings, one of them of the 3 prehistoric statuettes dating from 4000 to 2600 BC, now at the Iraq Museum in Baghdad. References to prehistoric images are common in Miró's work. Picasso and Miró both believed that pure creation was graffiti, a small gesture on a wall. These images in Son Boutet are exactly that. The freedom of execution brings to mind the tendency to draw towards the corner, towards the exit that we often see in prehistoric murals. Modern cities are constantly dressed in graffiti. The universal urge to leave one's mark behind has not changed since prehistory. With the passing of time, the art of drawing has not improved. It simply portrays different things. The artist who drew these animals 30,000 years ago had the same skills of observation than Delacroix, Rubens, Picasso, or Da Vinci. My own work as an artist in residence in Çatalhöyük, Turkey in 2007 illustrates the way an artist's intervention may help archaeologists during excavations. As soon as I arrived, I was drawn to this unit. It was built by the archaeological team as an exact replica of a typical home in Çatalhöyük from 9,000 years ago. This is the interior. The way the light reflected on the wall captivated me at once, and I knew that I had to watch every second of it. Throughout the first 48 hours, when the sun was out, I filmed the beam of light from every possible angle. After sunset, I did the editing. I speeded up the movement of the sun and showed my poetic composition to Professor Hodder, who immediately identified it as a sun clock, thus proving the success of our teamwork. This perhaps would explain why the entrance to every house was placed on the roof on the southeast corner. If you like, you can see the whole video later. Not only was there a sun clock, but sun permitting it, around 1640 every day, a screen would be reflected on the east wall for about 20-25 minutes that could be used as a puppet theatre. Shadows have not changed since prehistory. My third experience was at the end of the season when I was witness to the discovery of a burial chamber, with a beautiful spiral relief drawn around 3 of its walls. The experts kept a meticulous record of it. As the season ended, it was buried to be excavated again the following summer for further restoration. Although the photographic data of this plaster relief is excellent, and what is left of it is well restored, when the viewer will see it eventually exhibited at a museum, this is all what will be displayed, as unfortunately it was not possible to save it completely. From the time that the spirals were excavated to the moment that they were buried again, I spent a long time inside and outside the burial chamber, drawing and trying to understand how the marks were made. I noticed that because of the strong heat, the plaster began to shrink, altering the appearance of the marks, something I became aware of after having stared at the plaster for hours. A finger or a stick was probably used to make the marks, and they were likely to have been done in one go on the wet plaster. To attain such accuracy of proportion in one go is an extraordinary achievement. These are the kind of observations only an artist could have made. The proportions of the grave gave it a particular intimacy. The spirals were alive by the graceful movement of their curves. They were skillfully positioned. Every inch had been carefully thought out to create an environment. Modern installations would envy such precision. Sadly, the excavation season ended. A longer period of time would have allowed me to further investigate the relief from the artist's perspective before all the evidence disappeared. Another example of an artist shedding light on the interpretation of prehistoric art is the painter Professor Peter de Francia. The horizon line is the same for everyone, no matter where you are standing, he said, suggesting that human perception of the environment is the same for everyone. This, rather than the Jungian notion of collective unconscious, accounts for the similarity in the style of prehistoric drawing across the planet. Since prehistory, the horizon line is a key element in the placing of images. In Chauvet, Lascaux, or Altamira, images were placed high above the horizon line. With climate changing, life outside the cave became possible. Images were also brought outside and moved down closer to the horizon line. In the frescoes of Çatalhöyük, the images were often placed under the horizon line. Subsequently, in historical times, paintings have been lowered even further to hang in museums at horizontal level. I will conclude with this painting done by me after my residency in Çatalhöyük. It portrays Plato's cave, where humans deprived of freedom would conceive reality from observing shadows on a wall. Nowadays, the media via technology is constantly loading the modern mind with much information, casting similar shadows to those of Plato's cave. There is more to prehistoric art than archaeology, and as the examples I have cited here show, the artists working alongside scientists can make valuable contributions to the understanding of the past. The basic urge of the image maker has not changed through millennia, and I believe that more than ever before we need the eye of the artist to look back to the beginning of human awareness. This merging of disciplines can enlarge the language with which to answer the questions posed by prehistoric art. Thank you very much.